Okay, in the previous video we started talking about functions and we talked about void functions and basically how they don't really do a lot except for you call the function, execute some statements, and it takes care of them being done. The real power in functions is the idea that I can pass values to it and return some values from it. Okay, so in generality, functions come from at least three different places. One, from Python itself. So when you install Python, there are numerous functions like print, int, type. Those types are all Python functions that are already there. Okay, they're an integral part of Python. Then there's Python modules you can get that are pre-installed, like math and those things. Those are already there. Random is another example of some pre-installed modules that we can use and import in to do work with. The last one is you can get them from your own code, okay? And we can write our own functions to do some various different things, all right? Now, what we're going to look at here is we're going to look at something called a parameterized function, okay? Now, what does that mean? It sounds fancy, but it's honestly not. It's not as bad as you would think. Okay. Essentially, what that means is I want to send it or provide it with some kind of value, some kind of I don't know, a number or a string or something. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called number, or better yet, show double. Okay? And this is going to accept a value of number. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we're going to take a result, and that's going to be equal to our number times 2. And then it's just going to print, print, there we go. The result of the double is, and we're going to show result. Okay? Now, in order to do anything with that, I need to now somehow get a value for a number. So we're going to define main, and we're going to prompt the user for a number. So we're going to say number equals, it's going to be an integer. We're going to input, enter in an integer to double. Okay. So they're going to give us a number. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call the function. So show double. And we're going to pass it number. Okay? Now, both of these functions are still void functions. Okay? These are not value returning functions. They're still void functions because they're just going to process and be done. All right? So I have a main function that I created, and it's going to accept an integer from the console, from user input. They're going to enter in that integer. It's going to store that value as number. We're then going to take that number and pass it to our show double function. So we call show double. It puts that number here, and that becomes that variable. Okay? It'll process through and print the result. So the last thing I need to do here is just call main. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to prompt me to save it. So I'm going to call this, let's put this in my Python folder here, and I'm going to call this Python, or better yet, number doubler. Okay, number doubler. Click save. All right, so down towards the bottom of the screen, I know it's kind of hard to see here. Let me adjust my window a little bit here. Enter an integer to double. So I'll put in 10. The result's 20. So it doubled the number. So it took 10, multiplied by 2, and doubled it. Okay, nothing real fancy there. All right. So what happened was I called main, so I went in here and it prompted the user for a number and sent them the number. Now, this number variable here is a locally significant only. Okay, it's locally significant only. Only. Meaning this only means something to this main function. Number up here and result up here are locally significant to show double, that function. What's that mean? Well, I'll show you. I can change this to x, change this to x, and it will still work. So if I change this to x, and I change this to x, because I still want to send this integer, right? So I change it to an x. If I run it now, go ahead and save it. I'll put in 10 again just to show there's no tricks, and you can see the result of the double is 20. The fact that I use x here has no bearing on the fact that I use number up here. When I pass these values, okay, it is only going to pass the value associated with that x, which is whatever integer somebody entered here. Okay? It doesn't need to be the same. Now, could they be? Sure, they could be. Okay? They could be. But again, it's the idea that all I'm sending is the value. So when I typed in the 10 here, and this said x equals 10, I'm sending 10 up here to be in place of number. That's all I'm doing. Okay? They could be the same, they could be different, but it really just depends. You have to think about scope. Okay? You have to think about scope. If I try up here to print x, it's not going to work because x is not defined in this function. Okay? And that's really the thought process you have to have. Okay? I can pass values up or around or however. I can pass a value to a function, but I am passing just that, just the value. Now, what's even cooler than that is I can also pass more than one value. Okay? So we're going to modify this just a little bit. I'm going to say num1 and num2. So our result is going to be num1 plus num2, and I'm going to put that in parentheses because I want to do that addition first, and I'm going to multiply it by 2. So down here, I need another value. So I'm going to say y equals integer, input, enter an integer to double. Okay, I know that's not exactly what I'm doing, but you get the idea. Okay, I mean, I guess you can say what we're going to do now is we're going to prompt the user for a number, prompt the user for another number, and I'm going to send them 2 values now. Okay, I'm going to send them 2 values. So if I run this, it's going to make me save it. I'm going to put in 10 and 12, and you can see the double is 44, because if I add 10 and add 12, it's 22, times 2 is 44. Now, endless amount. Okay, I can send as many as I want to. I can send 2, 3, 4, 5, 100. It really doesn't matter. Okay? What does matter is that I send enough for what they're receiving. And I'm not going to send more than they expect to receive. Okay, so what does that mean? All right, well, if I only run this function and I send them just x, this function up here has every expectation that's going to receive 2 values, 2 items from this call. Well, if I run this, go OK here, I'm going to enter in my 10, enter my 12, and you notice I get a double down here, or an error down here. Show double, missing 1 required positional argument. Here's the key too. We need to keep this in mind. We'll talk about what this means here in a little bit about positional argument, but you have to remember that an argument exists outside the functions. They are carriers of values. That means this is an argument. Okay? A parameter lives inside the function. These are parameters. Okay? Argument, parameter. So when it tells me it's missing one of the two positional parameters, that means it's missing one of these two things. That means the function I am calling expects to get, as this error says, more than just the one I sent. And it wants num2. Okay? So I know to go back and correct that. Now, let's do the flip side. Let's say I only request num1. Now, the program's going to have other issues too, but I just want to show you this. If I run this now, so I'm going to enter my numbers, so 10 and 12, and notice now it says show double takes one positional argument, but two are given. That's telling me that I am sending it two arguments, but it only wants one. Okay? So you have to make sure that you know what they are expecting to receive. Do they need 1? Do they need 2? Do they need 4? That's what you have to think about, okay? Is what are they actually trying to send? So since I'm going to want to receive 2, then I better send 2, okay? And that's important, okay? And that's important to know. Now, there are plenty of different things that can happen here, and we have to make sure, again, that we understand that these variables, so x and y in this case, are locally significant to this function. Num1 and num2 are locally significant to this function. We need to make sure we're aware of that. Okay? Now, what we really got to think about is position. Okay, it talks about that concept of positional argument, right? When we've seen this error over here, it said it takes one positional argument, or missing one required positional argument. What happens is these arguments go up and become these parameters in a specified order. The first argument I send becomes the first parameter. The second one becomes the second one. Okay, and this is important, and let me show you why. Let's do something simple. All right, so we're going to change this. Result is going to be equal to num1 plus num2, and we're going to divide that by num3. All right, so that means we're going to add in a num3 up here, not a bum, but a num3. And we're going to send it a z value. So I need to go in here and say z is equal to integer, input, let's see, enter an integer to, I'm just going to put enter an integer. I'm going to change these all to enter an integer. Okay, so enter an integer, enter an integer. All right, so it's going to ask for 3 different integers, and it's going to send them up. All right. Now, remember, as I said, position matters. So x will be first, then y, then z, and it'll pass them up in that order. All right. So if I run this as it is right now, we're going to do 15, 18, and 30. I don't know. All right. So what it does is it takes 15 and 18, it adds them together, divides them by, in this case, 30, okay, and then stores as a result. Now, why is this important? Well, what if we did this? 15, 18, and 0. Well, now we get divide by 0 error, okay, because it sends them up in that order. So the x goes up first, then the y, then the z. You have to keep this in mind, because when we work with these positions, we want to make sure that they're received in the proper order. Okay? So it's more important that we know not only how many arguments they want, but in what order. Okay? We've got to know that. We need to know not only here is the number, but also the order in which they want them. Okay? Now, we'll talk more about error correction and error detection, how we can work with that. But for now, I know I have to send 3 values, and I know the order in which they want them in, so I can make my determination based on that. All right? Now again, nothing else has changed. These are still locally significant. These are still locally significant. It's just the order. And that becomes important, especially for instances like this where we do division, if we do divide by 0. Now, what if we say, okay, you know what? I'm not sure what order they want them in, but I know the names they're looking for, and I want to make sure that I give them what they want. Okay? Well, what we can do is something called keyword argument passing. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, what I can do is in here, I'm going to change it to num1, num2, and num3. What I can do, or better yet, I'm going to leave them as x, y, and z. Let's leave them as x, y, and z. I don't want to complicate this anymore. Let's leave them that way. X, y, and z. What I can do is I can say, you know what, x is going to be equal to num1, y is equal to num2, and z is equal to num3. All right? This is what we want to have happen. All right? Let's just say it for an instance, okay? This is what we want to have happen. I want x to be whatever num1 is when it goes up here. I want y to be num2 whenever it goes up here. And I want z to be num3 whenever it goes up here. I want to make sure I get them in the correct order. Or better yet, I want x to be num3, and I want y to be 1, and I want z to be 2. Okay? Basically what I'm saying is I know what parameters they want, but I'm unsure of their position inside of here. Now, if I just try to run it like this, okay, I just want to show you. If we just run it like this, and save it, we'll do 10, 12, and 10. Okay, you're going to notice that we get an error, num3 is not defined. Okay, and I did this to prove a point. Num3 is not a variable inside this function. It is up here, but not down here, right? And because it's not, we have to think about what are they using when we send them up. So what we have to do is basically do something like this. All right, so we're going to get rid of these in a minute. I'm going to take these and say num1, num2, or better yet, no, let's do it this way. So we're going to leave this as x, y, and z. Okay? What I want to do in here is say, okay, you know what? Num1 equals x, num2 equals y, and num3 equals z. Then what I can do is this. I can say, you know what? Num1 is equal to num1, num2 is equal to num2, and num3 is equal to num3. Basically what that means is whatever I have for number 1 is going to go up as num1 up here. Same with 2 and the same with 3. Okay, let me show you. So I'll run this real quick here. So I'll put in, 10, 12, and 2. Okay? You can see that the program works just fine. Because what it does is it takes each one of these values and sends them up in that order. Now, I can switch this around. I can say that's going to be 2, this is going to be 3, and this is going to be 1. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. Let's make this easy. I'm going to change these back just for a minute. Bear with me, okay? Bear with me. Up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print num1, num2. Better yet, print num1, num1, and we're going to put num1, okay? Because what I want to do here is I want you to be able to see what's going up as those actual values. So I'm going to copy this here real quick. Paste and paste. Change this to 2. Change this to 3. Make this a 2. Make this a 3. All right. So what I'm doing here essentially is I'm just going to print a statement that shows what num1 and them are when I send them up, just so you can see what's actually being sent. All right. So if I run this, okay, 10, 12, and 2. So you can see that num1 was 10, num2 was 12, and num3 was 2 when I sent them up by calling my show double this way. Now if I change them, let's make this 2, make this 3, and make this 1, for example. If I run it now, I'm going to put the same numbers in, okay? 10, 12, and 2. You can see the order has been switched, and the result is different because I've sent them up in a different order, okay? The key here, though, is the fact that not only am I passing arguments to the function, but I'm specifying that num1 in your function should be equal to my num2. Your num2 in your function is going to be equal to my num3, and your num3 is going to be equal to my num1. Okay? Now, this here isn't necessary. I could just go in and make this num1, num2, and num3, right? And then I could get rid of those to clean the code up a little bit. And the same exact thing will happen. I am able to take these and pass these up and around. This is keyword argument passing, because what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, in your function, you're looking for a num1. All right, I'm going to send you something for num1. So the benefit here is, again, I don't know what order you may have put them in, but I know what you want. You want num1, num2, num3? Fine, I will send you values for those 3. And that's what this is doing, is it's going to send them up, okay? Now again, we have to be careful that whoever wrote the function appropriately, okay? Now, another thing we got to be cautious of, okay, is if we do something like this. Num1 is equal to num1, and then we'll send num2 and num3. Okay? So I'm using combination of keyword argument passing with just regular positional. Okay? Now this will be okay. All right? What we'll do is it will for sure send up num1 for num1. Now, if I do this, okay, it'll take the third number, whatever this one is, and set it up as the first, and then these two will fall in line behind it. So this one will use the keyword, and then these two will use positional. And that works just fine. I can do this too. I could do like num2 equals num2, and then use this last one as positional. What you can't do, though, is really kind of mix. And what I mean by that is you can't do this. Okay? If you try doing this, watch what happens. Okay, I got a positional argument problem. If you notice, it come up and told me that. See this? Positional argument follows a keyword. You can't put this keyword in the middle. So you say, okay, well, we'll just do this then. So num3, right? So if I do this, I'll put on my numbers, 10, 12, and 2. Everything works just fine, okay? it took the first one and put it in its place, and the second one, the third one. So you can do different things with them, all right? So this one's just going to be a positional argument, so on and so forth. You can do that. But what you have to be careful of is how you order them, meaning I can't do num1 equals num2, all right? Meaning whatever their num1 is up here, I can't do that here because this one has already filled that one in, all right? So the biggest thing is just be cautious when mixing keyword and positional because it can cause you a lot of headaches if you're not careful. All right? All right. Well, hopefully that helps you a little bit more with some of their functions and parameter passing and how that works. As always, if you have questions, feel free to contact me. If not, I bid you good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. Or is it good morning, good afternoon, good evening? Either way works.